boyfriend went on a vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, I look extremely tired because I've been filming for 7 hours. I'm not sad, don't worry. Storytime was sending me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months only. Here's the thing, we never bring up our exes, like ever. From my perspective, I thought we had a really healthy relationship. We're both really into fitness, would work out together every single day, and we made time to cook together every single day. He asked me to move in with him 2 months after we started dating, but I said no. I explained to him that I just wasn't ready for that, and he got really upset. That's when things started changing. He began making up excuses about not being able to hang out with me, and sometimes he wouldn't even show up to our gym dates. And I guess one of the mistakes that I made was giving him his space. A few days later, he calls me and tells me that he's in Boston for a work trip. He didn't even tell me he was going on a trip. I just said okay. Then I tracked his location on my phone and it turns out he's in the Bahamas. He forgot that I could track his location. I started investigating and you'll never guess what I found. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. Also, I'm just really tired from filming. I'm not sad, I promise. After checking his location and seeing that he was actually in the Bahamas and not Boston where he told me he was going, started doing some investigating on Instagram. I scanned his Instagram for people that he tagged, and I finally came across his ex's profile. No, I had never done this before just because I didn't care about his ex. Like I said in part 1, we never talked about our exes. Fortunately, her account was set to private, so I couldn't see her pictures or stories. But I did see on her bio that she was currently in the Bahamas. From his location, I could see what hotel he was staying at. So I called the hotel and asked for his room number. When they put me through, my boyfriend answered the phone. And the first words out of his mouth were, "How did you find me here?" I told him I could see his location and that he must have forgotten. That's when he came up with his lie. His boss asked him to go to the Bahamas for emergency business, and that he didn't have time to call me and tell me about it. In the background, I could hear that somebody opened the door and I heard a woman's voice. He instantly hung up on me. So I called his phone, but he wouldn't answer. In fact, he turned his phone off. It wasn't until 4 days later that he actually showed up to my apartment apologizing. He said his phone broke and that he couldn't get one while he was in the Bahamas. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend went on vacation with his ex behind my back. Should I break up with him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After 4 days of not hearing from my stupid boyfriend who was in the Bahamas, finally showed up to my apartment to apologize. I told him not to even bother because I knew that he was with his ex. Then he said, "You're right. I'm not even gonna lie to you." Then he came up with this whole story. He clearly had 4 days to think about it. Told me that his ex-girlfriend's boyfriend died and that she was in need of his help. She asked him to go to the Bahamas to spread her boyfriend's ashes. And of course, being the gentleman that he is, he said yeah. And that the only reason he didn't tell me was because he didn't want me to get jealous. So I asked him to confirm his story. I told him to call his ex and put her on speaker, and he refused. He said that I was being toxic and that doing that to his poor ex would bring up all the feelings she had from her boyfriend's death, and that she was grieving and I needed to respect her space. Gaslighting much? I told him I wouldn't believe him and then I kicked him out. He told me I was being so insensitive towards him. So I asked his ex on Instagram if the whole story was true. She hasn't opened the message and I'm still waiting for her to reply. It's been a few days since that happened and my boyfriend keeps coming back to my apartment with flowers and champagne. He keeps apologizing and asking me not to break up with him. I know you're all thinking I should just leave him, but I really love him. And maybe the story is true. They shouldn't have lied. I can't confirm his story. What should I do?
I've had problems with my mother-in-law long before I gave birth last August, but ever since then, it's been an utter nightmare. When I first came home from the hospital, we went to stay with my parents. Big mistake in general, but she insisted on being able to stay there too, as it wouldn't be fair for my parents to get all the time with the baby and not her. My mother-in-law had boundary issues before the baby was born, but after, it wasn't still as awful. She wouldn't listen to any rule that we put in place. Constantly kissing my 40-year-old baby, not giving me time alone to even breastfeed or pump. It had gotten so bad that my PPD had become so exasperated that I wasn't eating and I was crying constantly. My husband tried to constantly get her to stop, but eventually we had to just kick her and by extension brother-in-law and his grandmother out and send them back home. Now that you have some background on the type of person that she is, it brings us to yesterday. My dad usually watches the baby during the week, which irritated my mother-in-law to no end because it wasn't fair even though she lives an hour and a half away from us. So after harassing us for months, we finally broke down and allowed her to watch a baby every Wednesday at our apartment. Well, yesterday I was about halfway through my shift at work when I get a phone call from my brother-in-law. He never calls me, so I knew something was up immediately. Apparently, my mother-in-law called him in hysterics that she dropped the baby and was scared that she was seriously hurt. She called my brother-in-law, the one who lives an hour and a half away with her. I quickly hung up and tried to call her 7 times with no answer. I called my mom since she lives closer and she immediately went over. At this point, I'm frantic and running to grab my coat when I get my husband on the phone. I explained the situation and he's livid, but his shift was also thankfully ending much sooner than mine, so he was able to leave an hour early and shoot home. He finally got her on the phone, but when he did, she was completely undone and he couldn't understand a word that was being said, so he flew home. My husband and mother got there at the same time to find my mother-in-law sobbing on the couch and thankfully perfectly fine, except for a bruise and a cut under the eye, 6-month-old who was in her bouncer laughing at her grandmother's tears. Everything was figured out and the doctors were seen and we sent mother-in-law home. My mother-in-law called me to try and explain, but I cut her off and told her that she could no longer watch my child. And yes, I had already discussed this with my husband. I told her that if she cannot handle an emergency, then she cannot handle my infant alone. She is now inconsolable and telling everyone who will listen that we're never allowing her to see our child again.
You know that meme or that joke people make where they say, oh, I'm not actually funny, I'm just really mean, and people think that I'm joking? Well, I have the opposite of that problem where sometimes I think I'm making a joke and people take it seriously and I realize how mean they think that I am. Like one time my roommate was moving out, right? And she asked me for a singular piece of tape and I said, you can take the whole roll of packing tape. And she said, no, I just need one piece, I'm gonna go get my own. And the next day she did. She got her own packing tape and she walked into the house and she held it up in the air like she was a character from a video game and she said, look what I got. She was very proud and I said, oh, thank you. Since you got tape now, could you please tear off a piece and put it on my door to replace the piece that I gave you yesterday? And she knew that I was joking because that's absurd. But the other roommate in the room was like, good Lord, Kate is wound way too tight. Which, to be fair to her, I am, and I'm not proud of that. The other day I was at the movies and there was this girl sitting next to me crinkling her wrapper and I was like, be cool, be cool, be cool. But I was already in a state of pre-anger at her because she and her boyfriend came and stole the seats next to me that weren't theirs. They were COVID seats and I was very excited. You know, the ones that are like sectioned off so that you don't have to sit next to strangers. And I love that because I don't like sitting next to farting, chewing, whispering strangers. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. We're all farting, whispering, chewing strangers to somebody on earth. But they came and took these seats and then they weren't even laughing. And I was like, listen, if you're going to come to a comedy movie and steal seats that aren't even yours, then at least come with an eager laugh and don't sit there pretending like you're too good for jokes. Okay, grow up. And then she was crinkling her wrapper and I was like, be cool, be cool, be cool. And she just kept doing it and I was like, what is she doing over there? Origami? So I just stared at her and I stared at the wrapper in her hands until she stopped making noise. And my sister's also petrified of me, apparently. We were out walking my dog. We were in a building, actually. And I ran out of the building to grab something from my car. And she was holding my dog's leash. And my dog got stressed that I was gone, so he just started to pee. And when I walked back into the building, she was hunched over my dog with both her hands clasped. And she said, this isn't what it looks like. And I said, did you try to catch his pee in your hands? She said, oh, I guess it's exactly what it looks like. I just didn't want you to get mad that I let him pee. And I was like, well, it's not your fault. Then the next morning, I was taking her to the airport and I pulled into a McDonald's drive-thru and she said, oh, are we getting breakfast? And I said, no, I'm getting breakfast for myself. I'm not getting any for you. And she got really sad. And I was just like, why would you think I was serious? I would never go through a drive-thru and not also get you food. I once stumped a guy because he took me through a Taco Bell drive-thru and did not ask me if I wanted anything. I mean, that wasn't the only reason we broke up. There were other reasons. Like, I'd never seen him without a beard and then he shaved it and I was like,
I almost died today. I was trying to be a responsible mother to go pick up my daughter early from school because apparently there's going to be snow, sleet, and hail. And I wanted to leave before everything got frozen because I didn't live in an igloo in Antarctica. So I don't know how to drive in this ice. So here I am taking all the precautions necessary. I put my jacket on, put my hoodie on, I put my gloves on. While I'm about to walk down the steps of my home and boom, my legs are up here. I never knew I was that flexible. I cut my leg, pulled the hamstring and my elbow.